Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join His mission. This podcast is powered by Within Reach Global. Subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube today. Visit missionspulse.com.
Welcome back to Missions Pulse, where we encourage you to know God's heart, join His mission. That's what it's really all about. I mean, and first of all, it's inevitable, isn't it? When you see and when you feel God's heart, that pulsation, His heartbeat, whether it's in a conference or a church or quietly in your own home as you're reading the Word or praying, when the Holy Spirit touches your heart and you begin to sense that Father heart of God, when you start to feel that beat, right, you get closer and closer to Him. It is inevitable that you want to join what He's doing. He's always at work. He's at work in every geographic coordinate around the world, and from America to here in Thailand, where I'm recording, to China, every place, and He wants you to be a part. I'm really excited about today because I think you're going to be challenged and inspired. We might even debunk some myths about Gen Z. Who knows? But who better to do that than my guest today, Greg Stier. Let me read you a little bit about him. He is a champion for unleashing this generation with the gospel. That right there could just stop, but I'm going to continue with his bio anyway. As the founder of Share Ministries, he's driven to help the church activate Christian teenagers to reach their friends. In fact, in the last 30 years, Greg has trained millions of youth leaders and students how to relationally engage their world with the good news of Jesus. A much sought-after speaker, Greg is a former pastor, church planter, youth leader, as well as the author of numerous books, including his latest, which we're going to talk about, Unlikely Fighter, the story of how a fatherless street kid overcame violence, chaos, and confusion to become a radical Christ follower. Sounds pretty exciting to me. Greg, I'm really excited and happy that you joined me today. Thanks. Welcome to the show.
So glad to be here and be a part of it. That bio feels like a lot of pressure to live up to. I'm like, oh my goodness,
yeah,
what's going to happen?
I don't know if you wrote that or one of your staff or what, but maybe that's Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's right. I have no idea.
It's definitely
I think, when I tell people I was a roofer for 8 years, and that's what I did. I put on roofs, and God took me from a roofer to a preacher, and now I get to mobilize teens for the gospel. So it's a lot of fun. I love it.
Awesome. I did roofing for a while too. That could be real fun, but it is backbreaking.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I tell people, I know I'm going to heaven because I've already been through hell.
I was just going to say, can you tell us like one crazy story of roofing? Because I got one as well. And I know every roofer's got to have a crazy story. You tack your thumb against the roof or what?
Yeah, I actually did that once. I did in a cold Colorado day. But I'll tell you the cool story is we led a guy to Christ named Gil Lovato. And he was a roofer, but he sold dogs and had side businesses where he would pawn things and that he had picked up somewhere. But he came to Christ.
Sounds legit.
He came to Christ and we discipled him, and he died I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago. I went to his funeral. I hadn't seen him for years. And I'd say out of the 150 people who were there, he'd led 75% of them to Christ.
Wow.
So Gil, I had lost contact with him, but man, all that evangelism, discipleship, he was a great roofer, but he was even a greater evangelist. So that was a pretty cool story.
Don't you love how it's those run-of-the-mill ordinary folk who are running under the radar? He probably doesn't have a ton of followers on Twitter at the time, right? But man,
Twitter wasn't around at the time.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, those are the kind of guys they're doing the stuff, right?
He did have a lowrider with a chain link steering wheel and a TV inside, and he let me drive it one time back from Greeley, and that was the coolest day of my life. I was like, yeah, I'm rolling.
I take back everything I said about run-of-the-mill ordinary. That is not ordinary.
He was not run-of-the-mill ordinary. But the power of the gospel to change anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was going to tell my story, but it doesn't have a moral. So it's like, what's the point? It was just me under a roof one night at 3 a.m. because the next day we had to have it done for all the next steps. So we're on this A-frame dangling on ropes in the light of the moon, hammering a roof on.
I got tons of stories like that. Yeah, it's roofers.
But from roofer to preacher man. And I think this is what your book is about too. I'm sure it touches upon all those different parts of your story.
Yeah, the book, it's different actually. It's 22 chapters long. The first 21 happened before I turned 16. So I had just started roofing. And then the last chapter is kind of a catch-up chapter,
Yep.
kind of what's happened since. But it's really being raised in this inner city violent family. My family members, three of my uncles were competitive bodybuilders. The fourth one was a bouncer at the toughest bar in Denver. He looked like an offensive lineman. And the fifth one was a Golden Gloves boxer, judo champion, war hero. My mom was the only sister, and they were all afraid of her because she could fight with the best of them. And her weapon of choice was a baseball bat. And I saw her completely obliterate a guy's car once and then obliterate him with that baseball bat when I was
Wow.
5. So a lot of violence, the Denver Mafia nicknamed my uncles the Crazy Brothers. So
Yeah, I did read this. I think you sent me a manuscript of your book, or one of your staff
yeah,
did, and so I read all that.
yeah, yeah. So it was pretty intense. But then a
Yeah,
preacher reached into into North Denver, which at the time was the highest crime rate area in Denver, reached my whole family for Christ and trained us all how to share the gospel.
yeah,
And it was like night and day. So it was, and I was just a scared little kid. I wasn't a tough kid at all.
yeah,
Um, but I knew, okay, this is a different kind of fight. So that's kind of the idea of unlikely fighter.
yeah.
I became a different kind of fighter than my family, and
Absolutely, yeah.
through the
Well,
power of the gospel. No credit to me, man. It's Jesus came swooping in and transformed everything. So
I was on your Twitter the other day, and it was only a few days ago, and you wrote this, ties into what you're saying. It said, if we could see the unseeable and catch a glimpse of the unparalleled glory of heaven and the unrelenting fury of hell, we'd never fail to share the gospel with everyone we know and everyone we meet. Let's live like we see it. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Then you mentioned 2 Corinthians 5:7. So walk us through that a little bit more. Tell us about your story. I mean, you said everything changed. How did it change? What's been your journey since you were 16? And catch us up. Give us the last chapter. Is it you going to give us
yeah,
a last chapter of the book here, or maybe something extra? I don't know.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened, and it actually started when I was 12. My youth pastor gave me a homework assignment to go to the local shopping mall and put a tag on everybody's forehead, and it reads "Bound for Hell." And because just imagine this tag on their forehead, and I'm like, okay, seemed weird. Just do it for 30 minutes, and I did it for 30 minutes, and I was bawling in. It messed me up in all the right ways because I thought about the hell they were going through apart from Christ and the hell they were headed to apart from Christ, and broke my heart. I still see that tag to this day. So since then, I've been, sharing the gospel, but specifically Yankee, the guy that reached my whole family for Christ, he focused on teenagers. He used to say, if you want to reach a city for Christ, you got to reach the teens. And we had 800 students in our youth ministry. This preacher who was really a youth pastor with senior pastor clothes on, we had 800 kids.
That's a
Only
ton.
300 adults in our church. There was
Whoa,
only 300 adults.
that's
So
atypical.
he trained us and equipped us to reach our friends, and we did. And so I went to him when I was 15. I'm like, hey, why don't we train other churches how to do this? And he's like, well, we're the only ones with the gospel. It was kind of an independent fundamentalist church. I'm like, yeah, that's baloney. So I got on the phone and started calling churches, got a hold of Community Baptist Church a couple miles down the road. And I said, hey, talk to the youth pastor. Uh, can I come train your students how to share the gospel? He goes, how old are you? I go, 15. He goes, what are you doing Wednesday night? I go, riding my bike down there. So I rode my bike there, trained them all how to share the gospel, took them
Ooh,
out. And so kind of, I think the unofficial start of Dare to Share was there. And yeah, we moved to, arena events and all that. Now we have big simulcast, Dare to Share Live, that we do once a year, coming up on November 13th. But we already have over 1,100 churches signed up in the U.S., and we're opening up to Africa this year as well, and trying to really mobilize a generation for the gospel. The cool thing about what we do is we train, equip, and then we go do. We don't just talk about it. I tell people this ain't no watch party. This is a do party. We go out and put it into practice, and kids share stories. We have a Life in 6 Words app, which is an evangelistic app that they use to share the gospel, but also communicate with each other. It's just cool, and it's free. It's daretosharelive.org if anybody wants more information. Daretosharelive.org, the number 2.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Yeah, we want our vision is every teen everywhere hearing the gospel from a friend.
Hmm.
So not just street evangelism, but we believe in relational, loving street evangelism, not yelling at people, but talking to people. But really, where you make disciples is if you can get teenagers reaching their own peers with the gospel, then it begins to multiply.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
which is one of your guys' passions is helping youth leaders empower students to reach their world. That's the multiplication aspect.
We have a bunch of career opportunities for you to serve at Within Reach Global. Open positions include web developer, social media manager, graphic designer, short-term missions director, and more. We want to help you discover your unique God-given calling to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. Help give gospel access to people who have never heard of Jesus before. Go to withinreachglobal.org and click go.
Gen Z is this up and coming generation. My daughter, who's here right around the room in the room with me, is Gen Z, and you just mentioned something. Not this stand up on a soapbox with a bullhorn, yelling at people with a placard. Turn or burn or something like that. But just before we started recording, you were talking about how young people today, Gen Z specific, has never even experienced what you're talking about. The only way that you're going to reach them is relationally. You're talking about young people reaching young people, and your experience, 15 years old, going training other people how to do it. Is this the heartbeat? I mean, what's it going to take to see Gen Z move from this post-Christian milieu, and landscape
yeah.
into a Bible-believing, gospel-experiencing salvation experience?
Yeah, that's great. I would say this, right now the trajectory of the rejection of the historic Christian faith, specifically in the United States, is skyrocketing. And we're using traditional additional, strategies to try to close the gap. We're never going to close the gap with just, hey, come to our youth event. I believe in you. I believe in inviting kids out to youth events. I believe in a come and see approach, but you got to combine it. If when you combine a come and see approach with a go and get approach, that's like nitrogen and glycerin. So invite your friends to come to youth group, but also mobilize them to reach the kids that would never come to youth group, because an increasing number of kids will not come to youth group. So you have to look at, a public school kid as a federally funded missionary, and let's mobilize them to reach their peers, engage their classmates, and go for it. So what we have done, one of the great things about Gen Z is they're really into causes. And so we've reframed. We don't even call it the Great Commission at Dare to Share. We call it the cause.
That's cool.
So the ultimate cause, it's the great cause, and the cause is to go and make disciples, right? And you can tie every other cause in as a subset of the greatest cause. So you could tell a kid that's passionate about stopping human trafficking, hey, listen, stop human trafficking and stop soul trafficking, because Satan is the ultimate trafficker. He's trafficking a generation straight to hell. If the kid's passionate about feeding the hungry, well, give the hungry bread and give them the bread of life. Or, doing wells, give the thirsty water, but give them the living water. Or building homes for the homeless. Well, build a house for the homeless here on earth and one in heaven by giving them the gospel.
Absolutely.
So everything can be a subset of that greatest cause, the cause of Christ. And when teenagers get that, I see it click like, oh, yes,
Yeah.
let's rock. And so I have great hope for Generation Z. I've staked my life on Gen Z teenagers, and I believe that they're the sleeping giant in the church. When Admiral Yamamoto of the Japanese forces, commander, after they bombed Pearl Harbor, somebody said, what do you think is going to happen? He said, I am fearful that all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with terrible resolve. Well, you think about teenagers. I think if we awaken the sleeping giant in the church, young people, and fill them with holy, gospel advancing resolve, they can turn that trajectory of the rejection. They can close the gap, because you're not just doing traditional additional strategies. You're going exponential. You're
Yeah.
multiplying disciples. So, but to do that, you have to train students how to give the gospel, because if you can't add, you can't multiply. And I think that's the problem. A lot of teenagers don't know how to share the gospel. They don't know how to add a soul to the kingdom. So you'll never multiply disciples. So that's why we do what we do. We train teens how to share the gospel. By the way, we made a huge shift this last year. We're getting out of the curriculum business and we're going to resource a revolution. So we're digitizing as much of our curriculum as we possibly can, and we're giving it away free. So just it's on our daretoshare.org store.
I was
So
going to
any
say,
youth
where do
leader
people
can
find
use
that?
it.
That's
Yeah,
dare,
just
the
go to
number 2, share.org.
Yeah, just go to the store. We haven't digitized everything yet, but we're working on it. It takes time and, all that process. But just we got tons of free books, free curriculum, 1-night curriculum, 4-week curriculum, and it's high quality. Some of it won awards, but we're giving it
Awesome.
away.
Okay, you guys watching this? Greg just said free. Make sure you head on over to daretoshare.org. That's dare, the number 2, share.org to make sure you get all that free resource. There's a bunch of stuff out there. Greg, a second ago, you're talking about staking your life, on Gen Z or on youth. The generations change. I'm sure it was millennials in the past. I mean, we're in Gen Z now and up and coming next generation. Where are we going after Gen Z, by the way? We're going to start over at A?
I think it's alpha.
Alpha. Okay. Yeah, I heard alpha, which is not really fair because, the greatest generation, Gen Alpha, it's way better of a cool name than all these other.
Z's pretty good. I like Z.
Gen Z is cool. I like Gen X. Actually, I like Xennial because I am one. 1978.
There you go. I'm between a boomer and a buster. I'm right on the dividing year. 1965 was when I was born. So when my daughter says, "Okay, boomer," I say, "No, it's okay, boom buster." I have a special name.
Oh yeah,
boom buster. Boom buster.
But you wear your hair like a millennial.
There you go. That's
right. And you're aging awesome, by the way. It looks like you hang out with youth all the time. I probably am right.
I do. Youth keep you young. That's right.
Well, as you were talking about Gen Z a second ago, it got me thinking, I recently wrote a book called The Mind of a Missionary. And I was juxtaposing all these different missionaries from the missionary generation, as sociologists call it. 1860 to 1882, I think, is the years from that missionary generation. And just like you were talking about a second ago, Gen Z, they were passionate about causes. And there's that shared similarity between Gen Z and the missionary generation. Not everyone was a missionary, but that is where tons of our missionary heroes and legends came from. Amy Carmichael, Hudson Taylor, Adoniram Judson, and the list goes on and on. Is this what we have to look forward to? Should we harness the passion of Gen Z or train them and teach them how to go from addition to multiplication in sharing their faith? Do we have a hope to see the West renewed and come back into a great awakening through Gen Z again, in your opinion?
We do. I think we have to change the way we do and view youth ministry. I wrote a book called Gospelize Your Youth Ministry, based on the 7 values we saw in every youth ministry that was actually making and multiplying disciples, 25% new conversion growth per year. They all had 7 things in common that they were doing, which is interesting. We cross-checked it with the book of Acts, all over the book of Acts, cross-checked it with the youth ministry at large, not in youth ministry at large. So we have to gospelize our youth ministry philosophy and strategy and models. And if we continue
what do you mean by that? Gospelize your
gospelize.
strategy.
First of all, it's a cool word. I
like it. I like the words that aren't real, that you're not going to find in the dictionary, but you kind of gravitate towards it.
It's actually a real word. I heard it in Charles Spurgeon. Well, I didn't know. I was listening, working out 20 feet away in my little workout room, listening to a Spurgeon sermon. Somebody read a Spurgeon sermon online because I'm a nerd, and he used the word gospelize, and I'm like, huh. He's like, to gospelize a man is the greatest miracle in the universe. And I'm like, gospelize. It's the original English word for evangelize. And it just sounds fuller, doesn't have the stereotypes. So I'm like, So when we were doing that research project, and we found those 7 values in every youth ministry. And so what we do now is we train youth leaders around the world how to gospelize their youth ministry. So how do you take those 7 values and build them into your youth ministries? I'll quickly go over those values so you can have them, and I'll tell you where you can find them. the number one characteristic of a youth ministry that's gospelized is intercessory prayer fuels it. They pray for the lost. That shouldn't surprise us that the youth groups that reach the most of the lost pray the most for the lost. 1 Timothy 2, Paul tells Timothy, who's programming the church of Ephesus, first of all, make prayer for kings and everyone, all in authority, intercessions, prayer, thanksgiving, because God wants all people to be saved and come to a knowledge of the truth. So intercessory prayer fuels it. Two, and we spend more time in announcements than intercessory prayer in the typical youth group, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Two, relational evangelism drives it. So teens are trained to add. They know how to share the gospel with their peers. Three, leaders fully embrace and model it. So leaders are leading the way for prayer, evangelism, and disciple multiplication, which is value number 4. Disciple multiplication strategy guides it. There's a bold vision that focuses it. Biblical outcomes measure it. So you're measuring the right things like baptisms, new conversion growth, spiritual maturation points, things like that. And then the 7th is ongoing programs reflect it. So you put your money where your mouth is. You put your priorities where your program is. You program in those priorities. So those 7 values look differently in different contexts, but they're like ingredients in a good food. You got the 7 good ingredients. You mix them, and it'll be gospelized. The gospel's the spice. Yeah. So where youth leaders or adults for that matter, because this could be gospelize your church, gospelize your family, gospelize your work, where you could find that if you go to daretashare.org, just look for gospel. We call it gospel advancing in the menu. Click on that. We go over the 7 values. My book is available as a free download, Gospelize Your Youth Ministry, on daretashare.org. So just go to Dare to Share and download away, read away, watch the videos.
Gospel Privilege provides the keys you need to unlock your full potential as an effective witness of God's kingdom power. This resource will inspire change in you as you read testimony after testimony of people who use their gospel privilege to bring the kingdom message worldwide. As author David Joannes testifies, gospel privilege is the soul-saving, culture-shaping, world-changing message that's come into the world through the person of Jesus. It is an unearned spiritual advantage with eternal consequences meant for every human being. Buy the book on Amazon or visit gospelprivilege.com to download a free chapter today.
It ain't brain surgery. I'm a roofer.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm a
back
former
to
roofer.
I think that's funny how a lot of people think it is. You talk about DMM, disciple multiplication or making movements. I totally geek out when it comes to missiology and these different bridges and contextualization and ways and means of multiplying disciples. We use all of that within Reach Global here. Just the basics. And I was actually just on a phone call today with a friend of mine. His name is Dwight Martin. He's actually, I would call him the gatekeeper of sorts of the FJCCA movement, which is here in Phetchabun, Thailand. Central Thailand, we're seeing an explosion of new salvations, somewhat of a great awakening coming to Thailand for the first time in 193 years since the first Protestant missionaries arrived in a country of less than 1% Christians, 0.77%. And he was telling me just today, he was telling me all these steps that they take first, initial believers do, first encounters with Christ. And he gave them the first thing they have, the same as yours. Number 1 of 7 is on prayer. And he said the same thing. This isn't rocket science. It's like, it's just so normal. In fact, I love that statement by A.B. Simpson. Prayer is the mighty engine that is to move the missionary force. And I love that. As you're sharing all these things, I got to ask you, can you tell me a specific example? Because we're talking maybe 50,000 foot view, right? Of Gen Z, of millennials, of young people today.
Yeah.
Our hopes, our aspirations to see, salvation and revival and great awakenings. Can you give me some on the ground, boots on the ground kind of examples? What have you seen? What are some experience you've seen?
So
you're chomping at the bit, I can tell.
I'll tell you a story about a youth leader that put these into practice, right? So his name's Todd Peters. He's at McLean Bible Church, which is where David Platt is the lead pastor now.
Yeah.
But he was a Navy SEAL for 26 years or 24 years. He retired top Navy SEAL. I mean, I think when he retired, he had $1 billion budget at his disposal. So this guy worked his way up the food chain. Came out, wanted to become a youth pastor, didn't know how to do it. So I had met him, and I gave him my book, Gospelize Your Youth Ministry. Showed him the 7 values. He went through some training. And then I asked him, how's youth ministry going? He goes, man, it's rocking, man. We're seeing new conversions and the other. And this is months later. And I'm like, okay. I said, what'd you think of Gospelize? He goes, I operationalized it. I go, what does that mean? Please don't kill me. He's like, I put it into practice. And what he did, I mean, they got to the point where they were like, they start their youth meetings on their knees praying for the lost. This is a youth group of 500 kids. They put the gospel. We use a gospel acrostic that really lays out the gospel. It was their wallpaper.
Awesome.
And it was cooler than any stuff we had produced. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this. It's awesome. Can I have one? And they train and equip their students in evangelism, and they made him a campus pastor at McLean, which means he's still a youth pastor, but with campus pastor clothes on. But he's setting the pace for all the other campuses because he's applying these 7 values church-wide, not just in the youth ministry. So it's been awesome to watch that.
Yeah.
And so I tell youth leaders, are you going to put this into practice like a youth leader, pick and choose what you like? Or are you going to put it into practice like a Navy SEAL?
Yeah, I love that. You're gospelizing. He's operationalizing. And when you're talking about, it's amazing how youth pastors, just say that word, and already you hear kind of this internal aspiration, like, I wish I could become more than a youth pastor. It's this kind of sentiment I think we have, because youth pastors are lower down on the rung on the ladder. Supposedly, we have this perception. I don't think it's the case. I mean, you just talked about a youth pastor who's putting things into practice church-wide. I think that's the point here. What you're talking is not just about Gen Z. You're not just talking about millennials.
No.
You're talking about gospel. You're talking about Spurgeon's gospelizing a generation, a culture. And that's what we need to see. This kind of youth ministry be implemented even church-wide.
Yeah. And so I look at it as like strategic being a youth pastor. I mean, teenagers come to Christ quicker. They spread the
Absolutely.
gospel faster and farther than adults. They can reach more with their social media than the average pastor could reach a year, right?
Yeah.
Super strategic. So we need to mobilize. We need to help youth leaders have a strategic model that matches the strategic generation. And right now, it's fun and games. It's a model. Like what I tell people is, I was like, we've inherited a box full of stuff, and that box is called youth ministry. And in that box, you have pizza, you have dodgeball, you have games, you have Bible lessons. There's a lot of good stuff in the box. I'm not a guy that says dump the box, burn the box. I'm like, hey, let's create room in the box for these 7 values. They have games, play dodgeball. Dodgeball is a perfect analogy for life, right? Run.
Yeah.
But make
Sounds like
sure
there's some
these
stories
7
there too.
Yeah. Yeah, make sure these values are in there. And then if those youth leaders become gospel advancing, then they become eventually maybe gospel advancing lead pastors, which is great because they're youth pastors like Yankee was, with budget and an authority.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they can make sure the youth ministry is funded and focused. And make sure that they hire the right people to become those youth leaders. So I actually think youth leaders, you ever see the movie The Untouchables with Sean Connery and Kevin Costner? I'll set it up.
I can't remember.
1930s, Al Capone,
Oh,
Chicago.
yeah. Yes. I know what you're talking about.
Sean
My mind
Connery.
went immediately
Yeah.
to India when you were talking about that. So I got thrown off.
So the Kevin Costner plays Elliot Ness, who's a federal agent to stop all the mob, and Sean Connery plays the role of the one good cop, and they can't find any other good cops, and Kevin Costner asks character Elliot Ness asks Sean Connery, how do we find a good cop? And Sean Connery in his Scottish brogue said, if you can't find a good apple in the barrel, go to the tree. And they go to the rookie training center and they find young cops that have not yet been corrupted.
Wow.
And That's what youth pastors are. Yeah, youth pastors that have not yet been institutionalized, that are
Yeah, it's a
ready,
blank
they're
slate.
twitching,
Yeah.
a blank slate, and they
I,
got in. I think down deep inside, most youth leaders, they got into youth ministry because they love Jesus and they love
Absolutely.
teenagers and they want to make the connection. They want this. When I talk to youth leaders, around the world, I've seen this. There's a hunger in their eyes to make a difference. It's just over time, it's easy to fall into the system. We're like, hey, let's create room in the box for these 7 values.
Absolutely.
A lack of gospel access is the greatest injustice known to humankind. We're looking for monthly donors who will help us combat gospel poverty by funding our locally led missions movements. When you give to Within Reach Global, you give gospel access to people who have never heard of Jesus before. Set up your monthly donation today at withinreachglobal.org/donate.
I almost feel like, Greg, like I feel like I need to hear you encourage something along that same line. Look to the trees in a Sean Connery voice to those who are watching. It's kind of like I don't know. I'm itching for it.
I can't. Yeah, well, I wish I could. It would just sound like not good. Because
what if you say it and I go back later and edit this conversation and kind of put some voice enhancer?
No.
No, okay, all right, it's not going to happen.
I have my limits.
Well, plus this is recorded. It could never be taken
right.
down from the internets. A second ago, before we started recording this conversation, we were talking about preaching the gospel and, when necessary, use words. The famous quote from St. Francis of Assisi, which is butchered, by the way. He didn't actually say that. What are your thoughts about this? I mean, there's recent studies, and I think it's Barna Pew Research that recently came out saying millennials and Gen Z feel comfortable and confident that they are sharing their faith with others by living their lives in a godly manner. There's absolutely truth to that, right? I mean, it's the two sides of the same coin, though, that you preach the gospel at all times with words because the gospel is preached with words. What are your thoughts about this? Can we go around preaching by our nice actions and being like Ellen DeGeneres or Oprah Winfrey and winning people to Christ? Or is there a little bit more to this supposed quote by St. Francis?
So we've adjusted the quote a bit at Dare to Share from preach the gospel, if necessary, use words, to preach the gospel, it's necessary, use words. We just adjusted it a little bit. Sue me, Francis. Who, as you said, that was taken out of context and probably didn't fully say that or mean that.
He's finally saying, someone got it, man. Someone translated my works originally.
So I would say this is, of course, we want to live the gospel, but there is inherent power in the message. Now, I don't know how God infused divine power into a stick that Moses used to open the Red Sea, to turn the Nile into blood, to launch the 10 plagues, to hold up over his head so they could win against the Midianites. I don't know how God infused divine power into a stick, but he did. And God infused divine power into a message that when we speak it out loud with words, it's explosive. It changes lives. It brings people from darkness to light. So I would say it's like 2 wings on an airplane. I've heard it put this way. It's like one wing is living it. The other wing is giving it. Later on today, I am getting on a plane, and I guarantee you, I don't want to fly a one-winged airplane, right? And we don't want to give a one-winged gospel. We want to live it, but we got to give it out loud with words. And so one of the things we do at Dare to Share is we provide tools and resources. We have a free app called Life in 6 Words, free on the App Store. Life in the number 6, Life in 6 Words. And it's in 12 different languages.
I noticed it's in Mandarin Chinese. Yeah. I spent 15 years
Mandarin,
in China. So that'll be
helpful. We were talking about that.
And we got
Mandarin.
You got a sizable demographic there.
Yeah.
With the China speaking community.
Yeah. So just, I tell teens, if you can swipe and read, you can share the gospel, but I use the app all the time. And I've never been turned down to engage somebody with it, because the way you use it is you ask somebody, if you were to describe your life in 6 words, what would they be? And then they choose the words out of 14 that would best describe their life. It's a tractor beam. It brings people in. Then you say, tell me why you chose those words. You hear their story. Then you say, can I share with you my words? And you share your story. And then can I share with you God's words? And you take them through the gospel acrostic, God, our sins, paying everyone life, GOSPEL. And there's verses you can pull up. And then at the end, if they trust Christ, you push a button that, yes, I'm ready to trust Christ. Water comes out, baptizes them. That would be awesome.
That would
But
be awesome,
not
man.
true.
But
Not true. I'm exaggerating.
but Life in 6 Words already sounds like it's cheating the system, because you're giving people the tools to walk into a conversation, confident and armed, and not feel awkward and say like, it's like that. Who's the comedian who's like, I don't want to make anyone feel awkward. That's why I like to talk to you about Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's or to say, boy, it's hot in here. It's hot in hell too. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you don't want to,
turn or burn.
not
buddy.
a good opener.
But
Yeah.
this app is already propping people up for success in their evangelistic efforts.
And what's cool is you can put the names of the people. Like yesterday, I was in my son's up at a Bible school, and he came down he's about an hour and a half way up in the mountains of Colorado. Came down for a couple hours, to hang out with us. And we were at a mall, and he needed some clothes. So we went into a store, and I saw this kid with a cross, and I was like, I like your cross. And he goes, yeah, my grandparents are religious. He goes, actually, my parents are religious. They named me Cross.
Whoa.
And I go, so where are you at? He goes, nah. So I walked him through the, life in 6 words, and I talked about a relationship with God, not a religion. And he's like, yeah, I never heard that before. And we have a video that goes with it called Life in 6 Words. He's going to watch it. So pray for Cross.
Yes.
But it was natural conversation. And it was a few minutes because, he was other customers and stuff, but we plant those seeds everywhere we go. And we share the message of the cross, even to people named Cross.
It seems to me he's got a cross bullet, bullseye right there. It doesn't sound like it's long before God's got his number. He's already had conversations about this.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I love to hear all this, Greg. And I wanted to ask you, you said you've seen this all over the world, right? You've seen conversations taking place. You've seen Gen Z rising up, debunking the myths of the direction of the church, moving to a post-Christian, setting. Where does this, with all these new movements and evangelism, where does this leave us in the state of the world? You got, over 2 billion people never heard the gospel. You're talking about 1040 window, unreached peoples, no access to the gospel. I mean, what's Gen Z's role to play? Does it extend beyond in the context that most people are using, these apps I think that you're talking about in the States, North America, into the world? Where do we go from here?
Oh, yeah. I think if we're going to really reach this world for Christ, and I preached at a pastor's conference last month in Austin. I go, if you're serious about reaching a city, because they want to reach our city in Austin, Texas, you got to get serious about mobilizing teenagers, because you're not going to do it reaching just adults. It's too slow. Speaking of construction, if you have a driveway you got to replace, you have to break up all the hard concrete, wheelbarrow it out, and then pour the wet cement. With teenagers, you just pour the wet cement. There's no hard concrete to break up. And so I think we have to get super strategic about mobilizing Gen Z for the gospel, because they are causal. They want a cause. I tell adults, teenagers need 3 things. They need, a king, a cause, and a crew. Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. I'm your king, right? Therefore, go and make disciples. There's your cause. And guess what? I'm with you always, and you're going as a crew with your other disciple friends, your cause crew. One of the things that we do just to mobilize them is the last Saturday of every month across the world, there's this thing blowing up called Go Share Day. Just the last Saturday of every month, go out and pray, care, and share the gospel out loud with words. It's goshareday.org.
Cool.
And
okay.
it just caught on. And I go out with my daughter, 17-year-old daughter, and a bunch of her friends. But there's youth groups all through South and Central America, some in Asia, Africa. It's growing. Awesome. And I think as we break out of COVID, it's going to be even more. So anyway, just let's do this. Let's stop talking. I had a buddy who was before he got saved, he was a street fighter. And he said he walked out of a bar one night, and 6 guys surrounded him, and they started talking smack. And I said, what'd you do? His name was Jim. He goes, I said, let's stop talking. Let's start rocking. I grabbed one, and boom. And we just all jumped in, and we had a party. And I go, listen, I don't ever want to literally fight somebody, but I want to do ministry like that.
Yeah.
Let's stop talking about it in our committees and mission. Let's go do this thing.
Yeah.
Share Christ every day. I prayed this morning, Lord, give me an opportunity to share Christ today. Give me an opportunity to mobilize a believer today. Give me an opportunity to shine the light of Christ today with my life and with my lips. And every day, let's pray that and let's go do it.
As you say that, immediately, Matthew 28:18. I mean, these are very commandative verbs. Go, make, teach. They're not, good ideas, but rather commands, mandates from God. I'm really excited about the simplicity of what you're sharing. Like you said, it's not rocket science, but I think it's going to start stirring people's faith. If people want to follow you, want to see what you're doing, what's up, what you're up to in life, and want to know more about Dare to Share, you've already given that website. I'll give it again, dare2share.org. Where else can people find you and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so I have a blog, gregstier.org. It's Stier. And then I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Greg Stier. Again, Stier, I before E. The other thing I would say is anybody that's interested in hearing more of my, if you like memoirs, if you like stories, my book, Unlikely Fighter, comes out November 9th. And Lee Strobel wrote the foreword. We got a bunch of high-powered endorsements, including my friend Scott Derrickson, who I was in Christian school with, who directed Doctor Strange. I mean, he's now a big-time Hollywood director, but he read the book and was excited about it. So I was like, all right, But it's a power. It's really about the power of the gospel and the potential of young people to change the world. So it's written for adults. It's written to anybody that, and the gospel is given clearly. So it'd be a good giveaway to a person that doesn't know Christ. So, and you can get it on Amazon or wherever books are sold.
Ooh, I love how you went there. So if you're watching, don't just get a copy for yourself, get 10. Get one for yourself, your mom, and give 8 others to some buddies, along with Life in 6 Words app, which is on the Play Store, Google Play Store, I imagine, as well as Apple. Hey, Greg, I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been awesome. I sense your passion. It's exciting. In fact, it reminds me, we were talking before about our mutual friend, Ron Luce. You remind me of that kind of, I don't know, go get him kind of guy. Let's do this. Ron Luce, founder of Team Mania Ministries, Acquire the Fire. He had his dukes up, right? He was always ready.
He's always, he's, I love it's an old quote from Winston Churchill. He said, a fanatic is someone who won't change his mind and won't change the subject. And Ron Luce was fanatical about mobilizing teenagers and seeing them come to Christ and grow in Christ and share Christ. So that became the basis for our friendship. I love Ron.
Okay, well, last question, then I'm going to let you go. I probably shouldn't go here, but I really feel led to do it. Since there's so much talk about fighting, the name of your book, everything, you, Ron Luce, the Octagon, who comes out the winner and how? I'm sorry,
goodness.
Ron.
I don't know, but he got jacked.
Dude,
I saw him and I'm like,
I've been with him a number of different places, recently in China and then also in Thailand, and every morning he's hitting the gym hard.
Yeah, I could tell.
Just so you know, in advance, before you answer.
Yeah, I take him in a New York minute.
All right, there you go.
For the glory of God and advancement of God's kingdom. Unless he's watching this, and if he's watching this, I'm just joking, Ron.
Obviously, we all know that. Hey,
we have a different kind of fight. That's right. We're fighting not against flesh and blood.
That's right. Hey, Greg, thanks so much for taking the time, man. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to connecting with you more.
Can't wait.
O Lord our God, you are the sovereign Lord over all creation. You are the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I give you praise and glory. From everlasting to everlasting you are God. I approach your throne with confidence. I rejoice that you delight to hear my prayers. Lord, I bring to you the nation of Western Sahara and the Sahrawi people. I thank you that you are the God who binds up the brokenhearted. There are many in Western Sahara who are brokenhearted. I ask you to heal them. I thank you that you are the God who proclaims freedom to the captives. There are many in Western Sahara who have been taken captive. I ask you to redeem them. I thank you that you are the God who proclaims release for the prisoners. There are many in Western Sahara who are imprisoned. I ask you to release them. I ask you to comfort those who mourn. I ask you to provide for those who grieve. I ask you to bring joy in place of mourning and praise instead of despair. I pray this year and even now that this would be the year of your favour. I pray that Sahrawi would hear and receive your wonderful message. I pray that Sahrawi would repent and believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. I pray that you would build your church among them in this time, in your precious name and for your glory. Amen.
Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join His mission. This podcast is powered by Within Reach Global. Subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube today. Visit missionspulse.com.